Hello, you wonderful people, and welcome to another episode of Bring It Back. This being a show where I talk about TV shows that were canceled and or short-lived that I would like to see get brought back in some shape or form. For today's episode, I'm going to talk about the show The Gifted. It was a show on Fox. If you're unaware what The Gifted was, it was a X-Men show, live-action X-Men show. Basically, you follow this one particular family where like a husband and wife have to basically be on the run with their children because it gets revealed that their children are mutant, and this is in a world where like obviously mutants are being kind of hunted and discriminated against. Obviously, I mean, that's kind of a core aspect, sadly, to to the X-Men storyline in general. But I think it's interesting because basically in this world, it's almost kind of, I don't think it's in the same continuity as Logan. It's kind of its own thing, but it has an element of Logan where it's like the X-Men and the Brotherhood aren't around anymore. So like basically the main characters you follow, they were kind of the core people left behind by the X-Men, like to be like, hey, you have this mission, you gotta basically look after, like they created what they call the Mutant Underground, or basically a safe haven for mutants, and they take in this family. But the story just kind of starts there, and it kind of spins out more and more as you get introduced to other mutants. The show is similar to Legion in the sense of not like the not like in the sense of like what Legion was, but more so in the sense of like how most of the mutants in Legion, most general people wouldn't know who they were. And I think that's the same thing in this show. Unless you're well versed in X-Men or just Marvel Comics in general, I don't think you know who most of this cast is. Because I think I looked into it a little bit. The siblings who are kind of like the main characters of the show, they don't exist in the comic books. I think they exist specifically for the show, but I'm pretty sure all the other mutants that pop up are actually mutants from the comic book. So I think it's just kind of an interesting thing, but they're not like the more well-known ones like your Wolverines, your Beasts, your Jean Greys, your Gambits, and your Cyclops, like so on and so forth. Like those are the more well-known X-Men. These are ones I feel like aren't like as like well known as like most others would be. So I mean, that's just me. Maybe because I'm not well versed in the Marvel comics, so maybe there were ones that like, oh, you don't know that this it might be stuff like that. But it was a really interesting show of constantly being on the run, and obviously like it didn't always stay that way, especially with the second season, because they introduced like kind of a more like essentially an equivalency to the Brotherhood pops up in the show, and it becomes this balance of like that divide that has always existed, the X-Men versus the Brotherhood, their perspectives, the very like model that is built after, whether it's like following a more Martin Luther King Jr. approach or a more Malcolm X approach. Obviously that's the core aspect of kind of what the whole X-Men like divide is created, anyway. So I mean, it's kind of like that's what that allegory is supposed to be about. So it was a really good like actiony, heavily science fictional show that took some really interesting directions and stuff like that. In case anyone ever tracks it down, because I don't. Last time I checked, you can find both seasons on Hulu. I don't know if you still can, but the show was taking some interesting directions, especially in the season 2 finale. Like some stuff had happened. I'm not going to spoil it, but from the way it ended, it seemed like they were setting up basically a Days of Future Past type of situation. I was like, oh, that was interesting. I think that's the direction they were heading into a possible third season, but sadly the show never got one. This was back in 2019 when the show got canceled, so I don't like. If there was something that would have happened, I mean, it's still potential for something to happen. I feel like it's less likely to happen because let's not forget, this was still kind of under that umbrella. I'm not sure if the deal between Disney and Fox is even going through at this point in time. Now, obviously, the X-Men at this point in time is under the umbrella of, Marvel Studios and Disney and stuff like that. So if something were like that, if this show was to get a second chance, it probably would have been beforehand. I don't see Disney or Marvel deciding like, oh, we're going to bring this show back. I would love it if they made that decision, but it's probably just, especially because like it's kind of like, well, Legion kind of was able to kind of finish on its own, so they don't have to worry about that. But that's why I'm just like, I just don't see Disney bringing the show back, which I would love for the show to come back to see where it would go. But, it's probably the whole thing of like, well, they've got their own potential future plans for the X-Men. So you probably see this get brought back maybe in some other shape or form in the future, but probably not to this extent, but something similar. It's just kind of a bummer because it's like these are the characters you got to know. Like I wanted to know where their stories were going to take them, where that series, what direction that series was heading, you know. So, but like I said, I would love for there to be more to this. I feel once again kind of a perfect place would be Hulu for it. I feel like considering everything, considering the X-Men connection, considering the Marvel connection, Hulu would be the best place. But I don't see that, you know, happening. So. But, you know, once again, always that thing of wishful hoping, you know, wishful thinking, like, hey, maybe something will happen after all this time. Maybe, but it seems unlikely. But it's just a show that I would love to see, you know, come back for probably not just one season, probably an extended run. If they could, I'd love it to run maybe like 4 or 5 seasons. I think 5 seasons is always a good benchmark. But, I mean, not unless they were setting up the third season to be, the third season could have potentially been the last. But I feel like, you know, if they had enough story to like, oh, we can go a couple seasons of like 5 or something, cool. But if the third season would have been the last, I would have been fine with that too. Once again, it's just always the thing of I want the story told that they wanted to tell. So if they felt like, oh, we can finish it in 3, but if they were like, oh, we can have more story to tell, I would have been ready for the show to go on as long as it needed to, you know. But really, that's all I wanted to talk about. Until the next time we meet, be happy, be safe, live life to the fullest, and enjoy it. Good day and good